So we're going to talk about blockchain right now. And blockchain is the other disruptive technology that the membership asks us about the most other than AI. And the thing about blockchain is, while it has disruption in common with AI, it's really, really different in terms of how that disruption is going to manifest itself. Because with AI, I think we all kind of have a line of sight into the future. We all have some idea what the future is going to look like with AI, whereas with blockchain, I'm not sure we do. We do in certain areas, but the disruption and the restructuring of our society through blockchain technology has the possibility of being quite extensive. And there are certain technologies that come along every once in a while that are just impossible to predict. The automobile was a technology that when it was first created, people thought it was a land yacht, a boat with a tiller. Nobody had the concept of a road. It was a boat, and it went over hills. When the television was invented, people were convinced all it was a camera on a radio show. So for about 12, 15 years, there was a camera film, basically a camera on a radio show, that's what it was. And blockchain is kind of at that stage in its development where I think it's really difficult for us to truly understand where it goes. Blockchain represents an immediate business opportunity for law firms. I believe that if law firms become knowledgeable about this particular technology, there are new business opportunities, there are new clients, there are new sources of revenue available because of this technology. Lehman Brothers, January 19th, 2008. I don't know if you remember that. January 19th, 2008. Lehman Brothers announced its best performance in the history of the company. Record performance. Its financial performance was actually double that of 4 years previously. They posted $59 billion of revenue and $4.2 billion of profit. Okay? That's in January. And 9 months later, they were out of business because it wasn't real. It wasn't real. And that disruption and that what a lot of people in tech saw as sort of being misled by this trusted third party is the beginning of the narrative of blockchain. This gentleman, Satoshi Nakamoto, who I'm not sure is real actually, he's kind of like Sophia the robot, but he is credited with inventing Bitcoin and blockchain that supports Bitcoin. And that was created in Halloween of that same year, October 31st, 2008. He made an announcement. That is the announcement he made that kicked the whole thing off. This is his actual white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. I don't have time to read it, but it's really, really amazingly interesting stuff. So what is blockchain? In a way, it's a trust machine. It's a way that that people can use the internet for the first time in history to transact with each other and share value in a way that you don't need to know the other person. You can trust that person even if they're an absolute stranger and you don't need a third party. And that's never, ever been able to be done in humanity since we started. There was never a way that you could transact with a stranger before the internet or after the internet until now. And that's sort of the fundamental key. It's basically a ledger, and it's a ledger that is until now, okay, so rather than having a trusted third party like a bank or government, you don't need banks. You actually don't need governments with blockchain. Technically, they're unnecessary. There's complex cryptography that makes it virtually impossible to falsify records. So when something is added to the blockchain, it can't be changed. And that's why you know you can trust it. Things can be added, but things can't be taken away and things can't be changed. That immutability and that security are really critical to it. So nobody can mess with it. There are sort of three things going on, and forgive me, but I think it's kind of important to understand that there's Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, which is an application. Okay. Then there's blockchain, which is sort of the underlying technology that supports those applications. And then there's something called the ICO, which you're probably reading more and more about, which is an independent coin offering. They're all related, but they're very distinct things. I like to think of Bitcoin as Helen of Troy in a lot of ways. Helen of Troy, in terms of mythology, was the face that launched 1,000 ships. And in a lot of ways, Bitcoin is going to be, I think, the application that is going to launch thousands and thousands of different applications. Another way to look at it from a metaphorical perspective that kind of helped me was that, in a way, if you've got a phone network, a generic phone network, that's kind of the idea of blockchain. And if you've got a specific phone network, that's blockchain for that application. It could be Bitcoin, it could be Ethereum. There's all sorts of applications currently out there and available. And then the specific use of the phone network is that particular cryptocurrency or application. It's interesting, this is just, I think, an interesting fact that it's taking more and more electricity to actually mine the coins. You can think of Bitcoin like gold. It needs to be mined, and it's mined by people who use computers, and they solve puzzles. And there's a maximum of 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be made available, and it's beginning to suck more and more juice out of the world to the point where it's now consuming more electricity than 159 countries, which I just think is fascinating. It's kind of a bubble, and this is true, The Atlantic, that once upon a time, if you added .com to your company name, you would increase your market cap as much as 74%. And Bitcoin is actually rising faster. And a lot of that's the effect that it has because it's got a finite number of coins, 21 million. I don't know where they're at right now, which was done to, basically be anti-inflationary. What's happening is people hoard it because they know it's limited. So rather than using it as a currency, people are grabbing the gold and putting it in the closet. And this is an example of the bubble, I think. And this is one of the most respected VCs in Silicon Valley. And they invested $12 million in CryptoKitties. I don't know how many of you are familiar with CryptoKitties, but I highly suggest you take a look at them. They're pretty amazing, but they're just a ridiculous app. Again, from a perspective, I think we really have to think about what money is, and what money is an illusion, right? Money is just an illusion. All money is the idea that we all have that it exists. And as long as we all have that collective delusion, money works. And the moment we don't, things get really, really ugly. And this is sort of the history of how money's evolved. And one could argue that cryptocurrency is the next form of money that will do away with, just like minted coins did away with shells. This, I think, really is indicative of what money really is. Now, this is an extraordinary value. Can you imagine? You can buy a $100 trillion Zimbabwe banknote for $134.75. Now, is that an amazing deal or what? That's extraordinary. I'd jump right on that if I were you. So blockchain technology is transforming the legal industry. Clients need advice, and more of them are going to look for law firms that can give them that advice. The whole area of contracts and smart contracts, land registry, deed management, intellectual property rights, maintaining public records, and we're going to get into it soon, but this whole area of ICOs and raising capital is an enormous business opportunity for you all. I think I talked about the difference between AI. AI is a means by which I think the legal profession can become dramatically more efficient, whereas blockchain is a technology that represents, I think, a significant opportunity in terms of just business. An ICO is not an IPO. They just happen to kind of sound similar. The only thing they really have in common is that they're both used to raise capital, but there's no ownership in an ICO. You're not buying into owning anything. I kind of think of it like you open up a bar in a town. You open up a bar and you sell 50 beer mugs. and you say, I want to sell my beer mugs for $10 each, and people buy the beer mug. That's the crypto. And when they come to the bar, they get 50% off on beer. The bar becomes super popular, and then people want to buy their mugs for $20, $30, and they sell the mugs. And that's kind of the way it is. It's a utility that gives you a potential engagement with a product that is potentially of advantage to you that may someday increase in value. And I just love this slide. This is a true story. This Russian gentleman invented a cryptocurrency called Klein. He raised $2 million. It's actually successful. It's actually successful. And I love his quotes. I just think they're amazing. I didn't want to suffocate and be a slave of the banks, Shlipnikov says, putting a hand on his throat. So I had to invent my own money. And I did it. I'm my own bank, government, regulator. We hope that the government will not try to intrude into our small experiment in our small village. The fact that the experiment is unusual and creative does not necessarily mean that it is illegal. We are working to clearly define the terms of the project. Certainly there are risks. An asteroid might hit the hen coop. So, we leave you with the video and then we'll invite the panel up.
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records, because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things. These innovations will change our lives forever, and it's all just beginning. To learn more about the urgent future of the blockchain, please visit iftf.org/blockchainfutureslab.
Hello everyone, I'm Robert Juodka, representing the Northern Europe region, Baltics, Lithuania in particular, and I'm representing the law firm Primus Derling. In fact, we're a full-service business law firm, member of Nextlaw, and we are very much engaged, apart from the traditional things, in advice to ICOs and blockchain-based technologies.
My name is Beate Erwin. I'm originally from Vienna, Austria. I'm now a US attorney working in a tax boutique law firm in Manhattan. We have an office in Toronto, and out of our 12 attorneys, 11 are tax lawyers and 1 is corporate. So our focus is definitely international tax.
Hello, my name is Joao Oliverio. I'm from Brazil. I work primarily as a corporate M&A attorney, but in the last, let's say 5 years, I've been spending a lot of time and resources of the firm within the fintech area. So it eventually led me to the blockchain world. I've been assisting some companies in Brazil, especially developers, like the entrepreneurs that have been trying to create new stuff from this area. So I think I'll be able to share some interesting facts with you guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Duarte Henriques. I'm a lawyer at BCH Lawyers Portugal. We specialize in international dispute resolution in a number of areas, including M&A, construction, banking and finance, also in third-party funding. But for the purposes of this event today, I would like to bring and call our expertise in IT disputes and tech disputes. And for that reason, I will also draw from my experience as a tech appointee of the Silicon Valley Arbitration and Mediation Center, which is a sort of think tank to develop and promote the use of arbitration among tech companies and within matters involving technological issues. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Aram Orbelyan from Armenia, a Concern-Dialog law firm, member of a network, a full-service law firm dealing pretty much with everything, but for the reasons of today's event, we are now consulting one of the quasi-governmental organizations on development of enabling legislation, which I will be telling during my speech. And in addition, we were working with several clients on different projects, including cryptocurrency exchanges, including implementation of smart contract or quasi-smart contract issues connected to some ICO-like issues. So we'll discuss on those topics, I believe, during the day.
I want to pick on Joao first, because it's interesting that you are a lawyer, a partner in a law firm, but you spend quite a bit of time actually working with entrepreneurs and developers and the people that are inventing blockchain. And so I thought maybe if we started with your perspective, because it's kind of building the world from the bottom up, that would be just terrific. So thank you.
Well, as I told, fintech work led me to the blockchain 2 years ago, I believe. And I got two developers, one from Rio, one from São Paulo, who are like top-notch developers in blockchain, which is an area really difficult to find experts like 2 years ago. So what they built was basically a platform, and the idea is that you can get all the use cases that Stephen mentioned, such as coins exchange, smart contracts, let's say books of register of shares and many different stuff, and you can do it like quickly as a, let's say, as a service. In this way, the client doesn't need to have like infrastructure on its own team for developers, and it can pay like a subscription in order to have the let's say blockchain working for him. And you can work in this area as like a open blockchain, like together with like the Bitcoin one or the Ethereum, or you can do it private. So the good thing is that I became really involved with them, also because I enjoy I enjoy technology since I was a kid. So they have been asking me to be part of the sales pitch of them all the time, with investors and with potential clients. So I was to get a good sense on what the companies are seeking. And incredibly, nowadays, they are not looking for the openness and that blockchain brings. They are looking more for have the blockchain because it's a hype, right, and to understand, but inside with a private one. But naturally, it will become more aware and more, let's say, people will be more able to understand the technology. What else? So basically, and well, I'm not going to jump into other questions. So.
Thank you. One point that Joao made was that I think is really important. is that there is the public blockchain, which is the blockchain that we're all reading about, but there are moves on the part of these trusted third parties, Wall Street, for example, where they're doing their best to invest in this blockchain, but then make it private so that they can maintain their foothold within the economy in terms of the business world. So they gain some of the benefits, but it's not actually what it was intended to be, and so there's sort of this push and pull between the public and the private, but it's because it is a quasi-threatening technology, and that's part of what it is they're doing to defend themselves. I want to go to Beate next, and we have two ICO experts, Beate and Robert, and talk to us about ICOs. They're so extraordinarily interesting. They're real. Yes, it's a bubble, but yes, real companies are raising real money, and it's happening more and more. Billions of dollars are being raised. And so if you could talk to us a little bit about your expertise around ICO, and I also know that you've got a particular interest in transfer pricing and some of the value that could be there for law firms. So Beate, if you could talk about that, that'd be great. Thank you.
So we were approached by one of our long-standing clients who wanted to invest into become an investor in an ICO, and he brought the IP developer to us, saying you do need to start with tax advice, because that's where the real big implications are for other investors that we want to get on board. The background was that both were US or are US citizens. And the IP developer, his first initial reaction was, let's go offshore, just take it there, and I'm fine in the US, I won't have to pay any tax, and we will raise lots of money, it's all paradise. And from regulatory perspective, it's very, it's kind of common knowledge that the SEC is taking a hard handle on ICOs, and they subjected to their rules, and it's some very delicate areas, so you have to be worried about that, and they will have a look at each and every ICO. From a tax perspective, there are not specific rules saying an ICO is taxed this and this way. The IRS came out 2014 with a notice saying that the tokens would be treated as property, which in layman terms means it will be taxable. So when the IP developer said we want to go offshore, I had to tell him there are no specific rules, but the existing rules will capture you in many ways, so that for US investors you're confronted with, and I don't want to get too technical, but it's CFC rules, it's passive foreign investment rules, deferrals are not possible. You have to face ordinary income tax, which is the highest rate you can have. There are no specific beneficial treatments. And what was also interesting about this case is that we had to work very closely with, because it's IP-related technology, very closely with IP lawyers to say what is possible from a tax side, how much is possible from an IP law side, legal side, how to structure it. And if you want to, from a tax side, receive or end up at this result, you have to do this and this from an IP side. And the bottom line was that he would have to give up a lot of control. And finally, and ultimately, it was his business decision whether he wanted to give up a lot of control over the technology he has developed, and which was more to be developed and raise the money. And then he decided that it's not doable. And we were looking at the US, and we are currently at that
Thank you.
point.
Robert, while we're on ICOs, why don't I ask you to talk about your experiences and also some of the perspectives that you've got in terms of whether, what's the difference between a solid ICO and a scam and so forth?
Well, obviously, ICO, in fact, is the independent coin offering, or essentially, in essence, it's very similar to an IPO, in fact, in essence. And actually, I would not agree with you, Stephen, that a token that is issued via that initial or independent coin offering does not grant property rights. All the fuzz, essentially, about ICOs as such are, in fact, because most of the advertisements around the world promised returns, promised profits, promised essentially part of incomes, management rights, right to sell the tokens in the secondary market, obligation of the issuer to buy back the tokens for some initially announced value, some essentially a call option, or put option, depends on the situation. So in fact, the whole fuzz and the biggest regulation issues actually arose because most of the tokens in fact purport to be securities. I mean, in the sense of classical securities. As a result of that, regulators stepped in, and obviously, different countries treat these processes totally differently. For example, China has outrightly banned ICOs as such at all. South Korea also followed suit. US is, probably US lawyers know better, but as much as I understand, is a not really ICO-friendly jurisdiction as a result of that. So essentially, we have the situation that there indeed were huge amounts of scams in the market because nobody really understood, what it's all, and then the participants who actually bought these tokens, they kind of, they either, were really trusting the issuers, or they just didn't understand it, didn't care, and the question was, from the very beginning, who were these, millions and millions of investors who actually, invested these, huge amounts of money into, let's say, a token, which actually, produces cats, virtual cats. So who are the people? So the answer was that, in fact, most of the first wave of investors into ICOs were in fact people who got rich via the Bitcoin bubble or Ethereum bubble, etc. bubble. So essentially, having invested in, $10 or euros into Bitcoin early on, and they actually became very rich very, very quickly. And psychologically, it was still the 10 euros or $10 for them. It was not 10,000 or 100,000. And as a result, they gave it away very easily, hoping maybe to win something from that. So most of them obviously lost the money. But in fact, that's always the first wave of economic development. Scams are always there. So what's happening now? In fact, we have the situation that the big established jurisdictions are actually very slow and very ICO hostile, whereas smaller jurisdictions like Switzerland, like Malta, like Lithuania, like Estonia, they are way more, let's say, so flexible and understanding about the nature and about the possibilities this kind of vehicle can grant and does grant the real economy. For example, Lithuania, as such, the government of Lithuania is extremely ICO friendly. The government has issued official guidelines on ICOs. What kind of criteria have to be abided, which laws regulate which processes, how it is taxed, how the tokens should be accounted for, what a market participant should expect while issuing this token and actually raising finances via the process. So, and all this bears fruit. For example, last year, 2017, Lithuania was actually the #1 country in the world that per capita attracted the biggest amount of financing via ICOs. Lithuania has only 2.8 million of inhabitants, and 500 million euro worth of funds were attracted via ICOs that were owned by Lithuanian, organizers, essentially. So first of all, talking about which ICOs to trust, which not to trust, in fact, you always have to rely on the same principles as if you were buying company, a share of a company, you do essentially basic due diligence. What is the product you're buying? What are the owners? Whether the team is viable, whether it exists at all. What does the white paper say? About the product. Sometimes, and these are real examples. A person actually decided to buy a new television set for himself, and he just jokingly essentially created a new coin, did the ICO, that was one of the few first examples, raised about $80,000, I think, and in the white paper and everywhere he just wrote, I need a new television, I want to buy a new television set, and essentially he received that money. Essentially it's all about people reading things that are written. Many white papers actually say that you will not receive anything ever. But people still invest in that. It's a simple stupidity, so to say. But that's human nature, unfortunately. So actually, you have to read. You have to kind of follow the forums that actually are quite numerous and actually give a lot of information about most of the projects, about most of the developers. Because it's like in real business, who develops that? If, I don't know, an unknown person of no history, develops a project, say, I will build a new electric car. That's, one potential investment kind of opportunity. And if, let's say, I don't know, Elon Musk says that, it's another potential business opportunity. It's all about the team, still the teams, do the projects. So in that sense, it's that. And also, jurisdictions. Most of the ICOs are actually done in Cayman Islands, in all these classical offshore jurisdictions. Better ones, in brackets, are done in Gibraltar. And let's say the most structured ones, the most secure ones are done actually in onshore jurisdictions within European Union, if we're talking about European Union here. So the same Estonia, Lithuania, Malta, Switzerland essentially, but it's not really European Union, but it's a European country. So they are the established jurisdictions that have a clearly set amount of rules, and you can really trust the rules and you can trust the regulator. Lithuanian bank actually is actively giving advice to all ICO issuers, and there is a special sandbox regulatory regime created that everyone who is doing an ICO can come to the bank, to the regulator, Lithuanian Central Bank, present their project, get answers from the regulator, what is wrong and what should be changed, in order to make it right. So the regulator is actively helping that. The Ministry of Finance is doing the same. The tax inspection is actually really issued an official explanation that payment tokens are tax neutral. They are not considered any property whatsoever, just like any other money. Utility tokens, they are considered as advance payments, they are not considered as income, and only sale of the tokens for real profit is considered income. So essentially the most relevant tax questions have been eliminated essentially by the government, and government of Malta is also, as much as I understand, following suit. So in fact it's the attitude of local jurisdiction of the government towards the product, because in fact ICOs are a very universal tool. It's a Swiss knife of financing, of attracting financing. It's way more liberal than IPO, but on the same time, it actually fulfills the same purpose. And given the proper regulation and proper structure, it really has remarkable future. So that's my.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Aram next. Both Beate and Robert touched on the whole regulatory framework, and I know that you're involved in legislation in Armenia, and I also know that you've got some perspective on whether or not you regulate the technology or the industry and the pros and cons of that, and I just think that would be really interesting for you to share with our membership. Thank you.
As you indicated and as I indicated, we were approached by one of our clients suggesting a quasi-governmental foundation asking us to support with the blockchain legislation. So first thing what we did, we tried to understand what does it mean blockchain and what is blockchain legislation and what is to be regulated, because technically there are a lot of elements. And then when we started to look at other countries, we saw that there are some countries which regulate it heavily, including what is specifically blockchain, what is it? Is it an asset? Is it money? Is it something? How it's regulated? How it's taxed? Just every element. And there are jurisdictions where it is completely not regulated in a single body, but it is regulated by different bodies. Like if you take United States, SEC has issued several statements depending on several elements of blockchain. And the game became more rewarding when we started to understand that the blockchain is not a unique technology. As we spoke, there is a public network or public or private network. So let's say there is a Bitcoin, which is a lot of computers all over the world, and you don't know who they have, and they just work, consume electricity, and then the blocks are added. So they just secure all those people, secure what is a block, what is the information. And technically we can put two computers together and create a blockchain and say, oh, this is also a blockchain, because those two computers would be working together and create blocks, and then we would say this is a blockchain. Satoshi has written that the proof of work should be element of security. What does it mean? In Bitcoin, how it works, there are a lot of computers, and there is a mathematical problem which is given to all the computers, and they try to solve it. They cannot solve it smart way. They have to try just numbers. They just put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and whoever does it first, then he solves it. Which is proof of work, which means doesn't matter how many computers you own. Technically, it just depends how much energy you consume, how much work you do. Then whoever is the first, then he gets the reward. And there is a Ripple, which is used by many banks now to do the clearing and processing, which is actually work based on ownership rather than work. So more computers you have, more chances that you would be the one who is be rewarded. However, the Ripple structure is done in a way so many banks would be owing those nodes, so no one can control. And understanding all this system, we understood that it's impossible to regulate blockchain as a blockchain. However, on the other side, we need to do something, because there is a phenomenon like blockchain, like Bitcoin, like Ethereum, like the solutions. And then we came to the second stage. What is blockchain? Is it money? Is it security? Is it asset? We found out that colleagues from Russia told me that there was a case when there was a divorce, and husband has sold everything and bought Bitcoin. And when they went to the court to divide, he said, no, Bitcoin is nothing. It's not money, it's not asset, it's not shares. So sorry, we are not going to share this. This is only mine, this is nothing. And the court kind of came up and said, technically it's not fitting under the civil code. We cannot divide it under the civil code, so it's nothing. So information can't be divided, so it's a piece of information. So we found out that what really is bringing together money, securities, and contracts, which is usually applied to, is actually a paper. So when you take money, is a paper, and in the same paper you can print a security, and on the same paper you can write a contract. And that is exactly what is a blockchain. It's a digital paper, which is very secure and transparent. So in a movie which we were seeing, there was a wording digital money, or digital cash actually. So sometimes people would say Bitcoin is a digital cash. So I just send Bitcoin to someone, and contrary to the electronic transfers, when I have a bank account, the other guy should have a bank account, or at least there should be some intermediary. This is done without intermediary by the system itself. On the other side, this is done secure, this is transparent, however, no one knows what is being transferred. So all this together shows that this is a technology which cannot be regulated, in our opinion, as a technology. However, coming back to the example of the Russian, which we have seen, there should be some changes in legislation. And one of the major changes in legislation which we were proposing is the following. Usually when you have securities, when you have precious papers being traded, usually you should have someone who is licensed. So you have a depository who is licensed, whose security of the computer is being checked, who has some software, there is a central bank or somebody who is regulating them. When we come to blockchain, let's say if you are building a system based on Ethereum or based on Bitcoin, You cannot have an entity who is owner of this system, so he cannot be licensed. And we understood that the solution should be a security level, and which actually we are working with one of the clients to set up a system of which would be evaluating the security of different systems, because it's like more than hundreds of different blockchains which can be used, and you don't want someone to issue a security on a private network and tomorrow just to change everything because it's just private to computers, he owns them. And so we came up with a solution that we need to make small changes in legislation. We should make blockchain be money if it is used as money, be security if it is used as a security, and make it possible to transfer and make it possible to have a security issuance without licensing of the company, rather by licensing or checking the security level of the network. That makes it possible for people to trade and make it, let's say, contract or whatever it would be, commodity contract or whatever it's written on it. So from that perspective, our approach was that blockchain cannot be regulated as technology, because tomorrow we can have block coin, or I don't know, something puppy coin, or something new technological solution, or AI blockchain or something. So technically you cannot go ahead and regulate. If you look at the securities regulation of most of the countries in Europe, we'll see that it's based on paper security, which is no case already for more than 20, 30 or maybe 50 years. However, the legislation stays on that concept and continues to be on that concept, like someone is printing a paper. So the same is with the blockchain. I believe that the blockchain is giving a huge opportunities for making everything happen rapidly and more securely and transparently. However, at the same time, with crypto, which gives make it secure, and it should not be regulated as a separate new entity. However, it's a medium. It's a secure paper on which you can write anything and you can transfer to anyone all over the world within the network. So that's the approach which we are doing in Armenia.
Thank you very much. Just quickly, Aram mentioned Ethereum, and for those of you who aren't familiar, it's another application that is being used to transfer smart contracts, which is another enormous trend right now. Having said that, Duarte, talk to us about your experiences around blockchain and dispute resolution. We haven't really touched on that. I know that is your area, or one of your many areas of expertise, and I think that would be very interesting.
Thank you. But firstly, I must say that I'm tempted to share your doubts as to whether this technology, mostly used for issuing coins, is not a bubble in itself. And I'm pretty agnostic, if not atheistic, and in this regard, because Bitcoins have this fundamental issue of not being traceable, not being centralized. So either they are subject to regulation and they are controlled, or they are free as it stands now. Currently in Portugal, we are facing a case where an hacker has entered into a computer system of my own football club and stole every information that the club has, and he sold to two competitor clubs, and was paid in Bitcoins. So nobody knows now who is this gentleman, how he was paid, and most of all, who paid him. So I share these doubts. But there's another area which must not be confused with Bitcoins and initial coin offers, and that it's being developed and promoted by the banks and financial institutions themselves, and is the use of smart contracts on their own businesses. I mean, so we are facing a group now. Currently, there's a group of around 35 banks that are developing their own system to use in their day-to-day basis. And we are not talking about just coins, but think, for example, of a loan that is secure with a mortgage. So in the very same moment where your client, a debtor, is entering into a loan with a bank, he may be signing virtually or digitally the contract, and at the same time allowing that his own property be attached to this loan. So this this will open extremely broadly the field that where smart contracts or where blockchain technology may be used in our practices. But coming to your direct question on the dispute resolution, I think we are talking about here a two-sided coin in what blockchain and dispute resolution are concerned. You can have dispute resolution in blockchain, but you can also have blockchain in dispute resolution. That is, using blockchain to dispute resolution and how to use or what to use as a mechanism to solve disputes arising out of the blockchain issues. So in what the use of blockchain is in dispute resolution is concerned, there are two direct examples that I can give you. One is very simple, that blockchain technologies allow you to trace, for instance, a document. It can safely trace the chain of custody of those documents without compromising the safety and the integrity of those documents. But you can also find problems such we often face in international dispute resolution, in international arbitration, which is related to the assessment of whether a document is material to the case and relevant to the outcome. Often what happens in arbitration is that the parties file some documents with their initial submissions, but some simply forget to file other documents, others don't do that until the very last moment. But the problem that arises is when a party lately wants to file a document, it must be established that this document is relevant to the case and material to the outcome. So who is going to assess whether this document is material and relevant? It should be the tribunal. But if the tribunal sees the document before it assesses whether it's relevant or not, it has already seen the document. So often, tribunals resort to external experts that assess whether this document should be presented to the tribunal. And here comes the part where we go to the basics of the blockchain. Blockchain is a technology, as Stefan has explained, that use blocks. So in this particular case, we can have a block inserted in this chain of the dispute, of the contract and lately of the dispute, saying referring this particular question to an external expert. So, and then this expert will just trigger a yes or no answer to the relevance and materiality of this document. And this answer that he provides will be inserted in this chain of blocks. Regarding the second question of how should disputes arising out of blockchain matters be solved, there is one I remember to hear about an Argentinian company which has coincidentally a Portuguese promoter as well, developing a system to insert a dispute resolution block into a smart contract chain. But the one really existing is a German company called Datarella that has developed a software, a library block called Code Legit. And they have run a particular experiment on the use of arbitration inside a smart contract. So I personally talked to the CEO of this company to understand better what was this experiment, how it was conducted, and what was the outcome. And we concluded that it simply there's not a replacement of the human decision making in this process. So we are speaking about blockchain, we are speaking about blocks technology, high sophisticated technology, but we are not speaking about replacing the decision maker. And in this case, there was somehow in the middle of this chain a dispute whether the delivered product was good or not. And so the purchaser triggered the no trigger, and this provoked that all the issue went to an hypothetical arbitration institute that appointed an arbitrator, and so the arbitrator assessed all the evidences and reached a decision and inserted the decision in the blockchain. So there was again a yes or no decision inserted in the chain, and therefore the contract was resumed. So this is one particular case where you can see how a particular method of resolving disputes can be inserted in this new technology. And this, I have no doubts that we have to face and we have to deal in the future with this, and our clients also must deal with this. Of course, the use of arbitration in these kinds of disputes raises a number of questions. And this is where we lawyers enter into action, because we must know how the formality requirements are met in this technology in order to have a proper arbitration agreement or another dispute resolution mechanism. We need to know who is going to dispute that dispute, particularly where the dispute is going to be solved. Where is the situs? Where is the seat of the arbitration? And foremost, where the award, the final award, is going to be made, because as you may know, in international arbitration there's a fundamental instrument that is the New York Convention of 58, that in summary transforms any arbitral award into an asset that can circulate across the around 150 and 60 countries that have signed. So we must know where this award has been made in order to know whether it is granted the recognition and the enforcement capabilities according to the New York Convention. So there's a lot of questions, there are a lot of opportunities for us to explore with the partners and clients that blockchain technology and smart contracts, and not only ICOs, are bringing to the table. Thank you.
Thank you.